Hi there, welcome to Saving the Republic. Socialism and globalism become more popular. Bernie drops out of the race, and the World Health Organization is officially unhinged. This is Saving the Republic, Episode 2. So, as y'all know, we are currently still dealing with quarantine and coronavirus, etc. So, with us from each of our individual areas, we have Nate Dunning from Mary Hardin Baylor,
Hey, I'm Nate Dunning.
and we have Kelly Neidert, currently in an undisclosed location.
I'm Kelly. I'm from the University of North Texas.
And we have Skylar from Texas Tech, but nowhere near Texas Tech.
Hey guys, this is Skylar Luxman. I'm coming live from Waco, Texas.
Wow, quite the difference in Lubbock and Waco. Hey, so Skylar, is socialism really all that better than capitalism, or is it just kind of a stupid trend that's kind of happening today?
Yeah, no, definitely not. I don't think socialism is better. I'm a hardcore capitalist. We have a lot of our friends, a lot of our uh, fellow Gen Zers are really taking up socialism. They think it's a great idea, but look at a lot of examples of socialism that have failed. The most current one is Venezuela. So a lot of times people point to Sweden and Finland as these like, socialist paradises, but the truth is that it's only because they have a capitalist free market uh, that allows for their welfare programs.
Yeah, that's exactly the irony. People go, "Oh, socialism." And you go, "Oh, what about Venezuela or Nicaragua or Cuba?" Oh, no, 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 no. Look at Sweden. No, no. Nate, can you kind of break down to us the differences, like why Venezuela is so bad, for example?
So Venezuela, basically, it's I believe it's the Maduro dictatorship, correct? Um, basically, they tried to do redistribution of wealth, and it's really not working out well. They were I believe the number one economy in South America before they started this whole socialism project, and now, well, their people are eating dogs. So
Yeah, and something else that's a big problem that I hadn't really considered is, especially with Venezuela and Nicaragua, is pretty much the entire country is owned by the government, and that's where the difference is with, for example, Sweden is. In Venezuela, the electric company is owned by the government. The TV stations owned by the government. Pretty much the entire thing is owned by the government. So, Kelly, can you explain to us, like, kind of why that leads to failure and why other countries don't follow it?
I mean, it pretty much leads to failure because it's extremely inefficient. I mean, we have stories of, kind of how it is right now, I guess. Like, the shelves are empty, like, anytime anybody goes to get groceries. Of course, we're just like that because we're in quarantine, but it's completely inefficient and nobody's happy, and that only leads to problems. So I think that's why a lot of countries don't want to change that, and that's why a lot of people kind of bash it.
Yeah,
It's kind
and
of fun. Oh, my bad.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's kind of funny. People are like, some people on Twitter were talking about how some stores are out of things, they have empty shelves, and everyone's saying, yeah, well, it's gonna like give it a few days, the shelves are gonna be stocked up. And like, I went back to HEB yesterday, and sure enough, they're full on like pretty much everything. It seems like kind of every couple of days they'll kind of run out, but they're constantly getting stuff back in, and that's
Mhm.
like when these people talk about, oh, your shelves are empty, like this is a very odd thing. So pretty much the shelves everywhere
Yeah,
were
definitely.
empty for at least a little while, but
And
we've actually rebounded.
Something with Sweden is like, in the '70s, for example, they were heavy socialists, and to the point where the people were complaining about how high they were getting taxed. So the people went crazy, and so they, for example, their pension system, which is like our Social Security, they privatized it. And then they started lowering taxes, and they started privatizing pretty much like a lot of stuff and went market. And suddenly it started going well for them, and they became one of the richest countries. And now people talk about, oh, tax the rich, especially here. Like, the rich aren't being taxed fairly. In Sweden, if you make $37,000 a year, you're getting taxed 60%. 60% at $37,000 a year. And so the myth of taxing the rich is not really, it's not really international. So when we hear socialism and globalism becomes such popular trends, can one of y'all explain why it's so appealing? Why does the whole planet feel the need to grab onto socialism and globalism?
I
Well, I
think
think.
that okay.
Well, what I'll say, yeah, what I'll say is like the thing about capitalism, it's so good that like you have the ability to move up and to make something greater. But a lot of times and it really helps everyone. But a lot of times people look at the people that are doing even better than them, and they'll be jealous. And although they've actually improved themselves, if somebody else improves even more, then you get greedy and you or envious, I should say, and they're doing so much better than I am. Although you've actually improved yourself, but just because someone else improves more than you improve doesn't mean that you're doing worse off. So,
uh, yeah, real quick before Kelly says her point is to the listeners, we're doing this through online video conference because of coronavirus. We can't meet up in person. So if you see some kind of like, and it sounds like people are all chiming in at the same time. We are not here in person, so if somebody says something, internet might be slow. So it takes us about 5 seconds to realize somebody's talking. So if you hear that, just remember, we're all kind of going through it right now. Anyway, but Kelly, what did you want to say?
I was just gonna say that I think especially for all of us, like we're in college. I know at UNT, the majority are like socialist, communist students, and I think that it's particularly appealing to them because they're college students. They're not really in the real world yet. They don't know that that doesn't work. They just think that that's the most fair thing. And I mean, I feel like a lot of them are gonna change their minds once they get out in the real world and see, oh, that doesn't work. But I definitely think that's why it's so appealing for college students.
Exactly, and something with these college students that I've been noticing is one of the biggest problems is how easy a professor can push them into one direction. You can be in a lecture, a professor can just go on a rant about one of their personal beliefs, whether it be right or left, and the student, because it's their professor, suddenly just kind of grab onto it, and it suddenly just becomes a part of their life just because their professor guided them in that direction. And what I personally believe, but don't, I wish it didn't have to be this way. I wish it could just be done now. Is I think that once our generation starts having children, start having, start, growing up, I think that you're going to see a lot of people move to the right. You're going to see a lot of people start criticizing Facebook and all these technology people, and you're gonna start seeing some extreme changes in our generation. I think we're gonna be the complete opposite of millennials. But right now, it's not being seen that way at all. Right now, we're having the majority, or unfortunately, on the left. But there's a lot of people that are starting to switch to the right, especially with this Bernie race dropping out, which we're going to talk about in about 30 minutes or so. But anyway, but Nate, is socialism and globalism a real big thing over there at University of Mary Hardin Baylor?
So there are I would say a significantly smaller amount of socialists here than at, let's say, UNT, for example. We definitely have a small element of that. We have a few professors who just openly say they consider themselves to be left leaning, things like that. But I would say, as a whole, we tend to be more middle ground when it comes to that area.
So we know how Mary Hardin Baylor stands, and we know how UNT stands. Skylar, how does Texas Tech reflect on socialism and globalism?
well, for the most part, Texas Tech's probably one of the most conservative 4-year schools, like big universities in Texas. The big thing here is that people don't really think about politics and they don't really care about it that much. That's always like that's always the hard part of being a conservative is like getting other people to pay attention to care about things. But we're definitely fortunate that we don't have as much of an issue with it. I think when it comes to professors, there probably is a bias in a lot of classes. A lot of professors are probably left leaning, but for the most part, we're
Sure.
better off with that, with not having to deal with that problem, better off than a lot of other schools.
Sure. In my specific case at UTA, I've noticed that some professors obviously are gonna be leaning in one direction. However, sorry, having some technology issues. However, I have one professor who was a big corporate person. I'd love for them to come on our podcast. So if by some miracle they're listening to this, uh, took this as an invite. They have talked about how this isn't, me sharing their private information. They talk about this in class. They teach a global business management. They were making about $600,000 a year for like the last 30 years. And he started a company, sold it for like $20 million. Big, he worked for Nokia, big dude, big or not big dude, big corporate dude. And he worked in HR. He had like 10,000 people under his employ, etc. He went to live in Finland. He went to live in Brazil. All this stuff. So he'll talk about, and what's ironic is most of the time, all these socialist and globalist people are like in the 1%, extremely, extremely rich. And the 1% is a lot lower than I personally thought it was. And so this professor will say stuff like, "Oh yeah, socialism doesn't work, but the happiness index is a lot higher." And then I just raised my hand. I was like, "Sir, they're not happy in Venezuela. They're not happy in Nicaragua, and these other countries that you're naming are market based. They're not 100% full throttle socialism." And just little stuff like that triggers me because I know for a fact that the class is listening and they're like, "Wow, socialism is a really good idea."
I'll even say that in like I had a class one time where the professor was talking about how a lot of these poor countries, they actually are happier. Like they at least like say that they're happier. Um, and if that's the case, then I think what the issue is that they're happier because they don't know better. Like you're happy because you're not missing. You don't know that you're missing out on something a lot better. Whereas if you're in the U.S. and you're comparatively, you know, a little worse off than other people, you're going to be more envious. Although the poor in the U.S., the poor, we would call that,
Sure.
they're way better off than like almost any other country.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, in Sweden, they're not the poor here don't get taxed 60%. They don't get taxed. They get all. I mean, they have all the benefits in the world, which I personally just think everybody should be taxed fairly, but whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
bring the
so
flat tax.
so I guess where we're going with this is what is the argument? I guess any of you can just kind of give your thoughts. Again, bear with us. This is Zoom, so it's going to take us a second to realize that we're talking. But what would be the official argument um, approaching a socialist or a globalist about why capitalism would be better? In my personal opinion, I'll go ahead and give my viewpoint. I kind of like to steal what Charlie Kirk says about you walk up to a socialist or a globalist and say, okay, do you trust the federal government? Do you truly trust the federal government? And usually they're going to say no. And you say, okay, why do you want to make that government bigger? Why do you want to make it so much bigger than what it is? And when I was watching him on saying that, I was like, that is such a simple but such a good point. So I guess we can just go in order. Nate, what's your argument to someone to convince them that capitalism is the way?
So one of the things I think is a big reason for capitalism is social mobility. You have the opportunity to go from the absolute poorest person in the country to the absolute wealthiest person in the country. You can maneuver between the social classes as you please. A lot of it depends on work ethic.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And to
Kelly, what
build
would you
on
say yours is? Or I'm sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
and to build
Again,
on your
Zoom, mind with us.
and to build on your point, have you ever been to the DMV and had like a really good experience where you were like, "Wow, I should really come back to the DMV more often"?
Exactly. And even when I went to Capitol Hill in DC, or any of us go to Capitol Hill, you see the same stuff that happens at the DMV at our nation's capital. But anyway, so now Kelly, what would you say?
I was gonna say the same thing. One of my friends kind of explains it in the DMV way. We went to some event last semester, and we got invited there, and it was a debate, and the kids were all like socialists, and he kind of just got up and said, you've seen how bad the DMV is. Do you really want the government running every aspect of everything? And everybody was like, no, like, you have a good point. So I think like that's a really good argument for it, because everybody's been to the DMV, nobody likes it. I think that's easy for everybody to understand. So I think that's a really good argument for it, like Nate said.
Yeah, definitely. That really, I mean, honestly, that really is a good argument. I kind of forgot to make that. I had earlier this morning. I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about the DMV. Skylar, what would your point be so we can close this out?
Yeah, well, so I was able to listen to Matt Ridley, who's the author of this book called The Rational Optimist, and he talked a lot about how capitalism responds to demands and is more efficient than socialism, and so it provides the most amount of people with the most amount of goods. You can't have a bureaucracy to handle everything, and so capitalism meets the demands because it's the only one where you have free markets. When you have the government deciding everything, the price is going to be wrong, which is going to lead to shortages or surpluses. So a lot of stuff goes wrong when the government is in control of industries.
Yeah, so really good points, all three of you. In the future, and we're going to be putting out more content throughout the week, we'll have more discussions on socialism and globalism. But what we really want to get to now is the World Health Organization.
So with the coronavirus, all of it, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the World Health Organization. A lot of people don't think that they've handled things completely efficiently, I guess. There's just been a lot of points that have been made on the news lately pointing out things that they've done wrong. So I guess, does anybody have any thoughts about how they've mishandled it, and if you think they really have mishandled it?
So with the World Health Organization, before we start talking about that, I just want to make the point: China is a part of the organization, and they violate more human rights than you can write down. And they don't. What I was noticing earlier today, I was watching Stephen Carter's podcast. He was talking about how World Health Organization doesn't recognize Taiwan as an official state. And then I was watching this interview, and they asked the World Health Organization on Skype. They asked him a personal or a question, and it was like, "So does the World Health Organization consider calling Taiwan a country, or recognizing Taiwan?" And the person's just kind of there frozen, just staring at the camera as if internet's messing up. And
Yeah.
and she's like, "Are you there?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question." And she's like, "Oh, okay, let me ask it again." And he's like, "No, that's fine. We can move on to another one." And then she's like, "No, but I want to know about the World Health Organization recognizing Taiwan." And then he disconnected. So I think that says all we need to know about the World Health Organization. I don't know if anybody else has anything to. So now we can answer Kelly's question. I just want to make that point.
I mean, also to build on to that a little bit, the World Health Organization, the biggest contributor to them is the United States. I believe we
$900 million, I think.
Yeah, I believe we pay about 10 times what China pays into the World Health Organization.
Yeah, China pays 90, we pay 900 million.
Yet they've chosen to bow down to China as if they're the supreme being of the World Health Organization. I mean, I just have to agree with Trump on this one. And if they're going to do this, we have to cut their funding. Like, we shouldn't be paying $900 million for an organization to bow down to China, who would be our biggest ideological enemy.
Or to announce that if Trump doesn't get it together, we're going to need more body bags. How is that politically correct or professional in any kind of way?
Yeah, but so to me, it's one of the big things was that back on January 14th, the World Health Organization tweeted that Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the coronavirus, and that's insane that they're taking like Chinese authorities at their statements at face value. What we've seen from China, they're not reliable or credible in any way.
Oh no, they're not.
Also, with that statement about no human-to-human contact transmission, they were tipped off by Taiwan in December to that, and they chose to ignore that because they don't recognize Taiwan as a country.
Yeah, and Taiwan presented hard, cold data back in December of human to human transmission of coronavirus to the WHO, and they didn't really acknowledge it. They just kind of threw it out the back window. They were like, whatever. Uh, and here we are, all kind of, we are having this meeting through Zoom because we can't meet in person because of the coronavirus. If the World Health Organization had just handled it a little differently, and they want to blame Trump all they can, Trump banned travel from China the same day that the World Health Organization declared it an emergency. And so, I mean, kind of surprises me a little bit there.
So do y'all have any thoughts on how Trump has reacted? Do you think that he's reacted appropriately to the WHO? Do you think there's anything he could have done better regarding them?
I think he's spot on to stop funding them. Like, these guys are not. If they were sort of being a little more fair, then that would be okay. But like to be a part of them. But I think he's totally right to get out of it. What do we actually get from it? I mean, we have our own CDC. I think they know what they're doing, and to pay this group that doesn't recognize the issue. And the World Health Organization is just, they're part of the UN, and China was added into the UN Human Rights Council. But I think for us to get out of the World Health Organization is a great move. They don't seem to have any issue with what China's doing. They've been expelling American journalists, and they're just all around really sketchy. Yeah.
And
Honestly, and I think that Trump. Sorry. See, okay, I'm gonna keep saying this about every 2 minutes. This Zoom thing is really annoying. I want us to meet in person so much more, but it just can't be done until coronavirus chills. But I think that I'll just hurry. I think that knowing Trump's history and the way that he usually presents himself to the media and the lack of political correctness, which I personally like. I think he's handled this extremely presidentially, to as much as he can. I think that during all this coronavirus time, our economy shut down basically because of China. The entire world is looking at China. Even China's buddies are like, "Bro, why are you doing this to us?" And so I just think that he's handled it to the best that he can, considering all things considered. And I think that a lot of things are going to be changed once we get out of this. With World Health Organization, a lot of funding is going to be changed. I think there are going to be reparations on China. Anyway, but Nate, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that building on to what Skylar was saying with the China being, I believe you said on the
Human Rights Council.
Human Rights Council. Yeah. They're literally, one of the things their factories are known for is having to have suicide nets to keep people from killing themselves because of the awful living conditions. Like, that's just not an acceptable.
Oh yeah, something that I noticed is I remember growing up, and even now, or in high school, seeing North Korea. I'm like, wow, North Korea, like, how are they even a country? How is that allowed? How can they just be so? And then I'm noticing, I always remembered, I'm like, okay, well, they get everything they have from China. And now I'm realizing China is basically North Korea. Maybe not to the same extent that North Korea is, but they're almost there. They're a step lower than North Korea is with the human right violations, the fake stores, just all this stuff. It's in all these buildings. China also has the towers that are empty or are about half occupied. That North Korea, the same thing. You see downtown Pyongyang, and it's all these towers. You're like, wow, it looks cool, except nobody's in them. And it turns out it's a lot of the similar thing in China. So they're really getting exposed.
The only way that North Korea is even around is because China gives them so much money. That's the only way that they can even exist. But back to China, I mean, they just do so much. The list goes on about the things China's done. Like I said, they expelled American journalists. They literally send religious minorities to concentration camps. They send their people to get re-educated. The fact that it's not a bigger deal, that more people don't talk about it, and that countries don't make a bigger deal about it, it's just kind of disgusting. It's kind of horrible, and I really hope that after this we start to kind of hold their feet to the fire a little bit more.
Yeah, and the listeners might be wondering, okay, why are they talking about China so much? The World Health Organization is kissing up to China so hard. They're like, if China says do this, they're gonna do it, and that's why we are getting concerned. And if you look at the globalist approach, all this unity with China, WHO, even the World Trade Organization, which is a whole other discussion, and the UN kind of makes us a little bit worried about why. So you ask us why? Okay, what's wrong with globalism? This we're okay with trade and foreign policy, but not globalism. I don't want China in charge of my personal rights. That's why I don't live in China. All this stuff. I'm so tempted not to go China. Anyway,
As
but
someone
I don't know if y'all want to comment on that, but
Well, as someone that, I'm kind of libertarian. I lean libertarian,
kind
at
of.
least. I lean libertarian. Uh, I sort of would roll my eyes at people like going on about the globalists. I feel like it's like Alex Jones talking, but really, even I recognize that we get a large. I think it's somewhere in like 75%. I think of our medical equipment, or maybe it's like pharmaceutical. Um,
95% ibuprofen comes from China.
Yeah, that's at least one. But I know like an overwhelming percent of a lot of like medical things come from China, uh, and we don't want to be reliant on them in a time of a crisis, like especially considering that the virus came from China. Like we don't want to be reliant on them. But not only that, we also just we fund them and with all of our manufacturing. Uh, like so much money goes over to China. So I actually saw like a tweet thread from this guy that was talking about it was like Western Kentucky, and he's talking about how all their people have lost their jobs due to manufacture China taking over manufacturing, um, and part of that was like China is also selling fentanyl to actually subsidizing the export of fentanyl to the United States, and it's just kind of it's just kind of unbelievable that we haven't taken more drastic measures to that. And I'm not a fan of tariffs or anything like that, but we just got to recognize the kind of abuses of their people that's going on and sort of make some changes to. We don't want to be so friendly to these guys, and I think we're going to see that in the next few years. I think we're gonna make some changes to how we do things with China.
I do have one more question. This is kind of on the topic, but it's kind of like conspiracy, I guess. I'm in a lot of boomer Facebook groups and they keep bringing it up, but they're talking about 5G and a lot of them are claiming that the coronavirus isn't real and it's just 5G making everybody sick. Um, I don't know, like I haven't really looked into that, but I've seen it a lot on my Facebook. Does anybody have any
No, my
thoughts on
mom,
that?
my mom keeps making that point over and over. She came in the other day. Did you see they put a 5G tower down the street? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like that black thing? She's like, yeah, that's a 5G tower. I was like, okay, who cares? And she said, those things have health violations. They give wavelengths off into you, in which honestly, to where we are in the world and the WHO in China wouldn't surprise me. But and also my mom thinks coronavirus is a front to get deep state arrests, or it's gonna be used as a way to distract the country as high profile arrests happen. Which also, if you've noticed AG Barr lately, I wouldn't be surprised if that starts happening. But it's funny that Kelly brings that up because it is a giant talking point that maybe we can cover in episode 3. But I can see Nate clearly wants to say something about 5G.
So, a little bit of my background, I'm studying computer information systems. So, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily an expert when it comes to communications technologies, but I know a little bit. And to just put it mildly a little bit, we don't get 5G in the middle of nowhere where UMHB is, or like in Lubbock where Texas Tech is. We don't get that until like
Metropolis,
8 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't get that until just like years later. So I see no way that this would be quote unquote spreading over the new 5G towers when a significant percentage of the country doesn't even have those yet. Like we have a ton of cases in the Bell County area, but
Mhm.
we're just this little. I don't even know if we're technically a blip on the map. I mean, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I find it Kelly. I find it funny that Kelly said boomer Facebook groups because I do think that. I mean, I'm sorry if you're a listener and you're getting offended by this, but I do think that trying to say 5G is spreading coronavirus is a little boomer. Doesn't mean that we're naive. I'm just saying I do think it's borderline boomer to think that because honestly, it is a virus that is transmitted respiratory and or by respiratory and it once it's on a surface it's very hard to get off. So I don't think that, I mean, and it's not to say 5G isn't a part of it, it's just to say that if it was, it would only contribute for like 5%. It
I
would be
don't
so minimal.
I don't know what that has to do with coronavirus at all. Like maybe it's just above my head, but I don't understand what that has to do with coronavirus. So
So the
Well,
main
no, it's
difference
the yeah. Go for it, Nate.
the main difference between 4G and 5G is essentially just the size of the wavelengths being transmitted by the towers. I believe there are also some higher power consumption things with 5G as well. Don't quote me on that though. But yeah, there's
Well, the
it's
thing, the reason people get paranoid is because 5G. The
it's
thing you
just
said about
radio waves.
wavelengths, yeah, radio exactly. So people think about the waves hitting their body, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna be shrunk or something." I mean, it's just paranoia.
I
That's
I
why I say
mean
it's boomer.
I mean, you're getting hit by waves all the time. You got radiation waves coming from the sun. Your microwave produces radiation. So many things around you produce radiation already. Like what? I mean, this is just a different wavelength.
if I get
I mean, and
coronavirus from my
and
microwave, things are going horribly wrong. Like then
yeah,
it's a real
yeah,
issue.
and I do think that some people think that our near future is going to be Terminator. Terminator in action is basically what it's going to be, which I don't think we're going to get to that because, like I said earlier in one of our earlier topics, I do think that our generation in the future is going to be flipping it, is going to be realizing what's going on, and they're not going to be so naive. So that's why I don't think we're going to turn into Terminator, but whatever.
I think there's a lot behind the theory. Like I feel like people have put too much effort into trying to connect that. But I guess we'll see where that goes in the next few weeks because some people are really adamant about it. But I think that's really all we have for this topic. Um, and our next topic is going to be Bernie dropping.
All right, so our next topic is about Bernie Sanders dropping out of the Democratic primary race. With us, we'll have Mackenzie Haddocks, who's the secretary of the Kansas College Republicans, to talk about this. Um, so let's go ahead and get started. So what do y'all think about Bernie dropping out? What impact do you think it's gonna have?
I kind of saw it coming. I don't know if I don't know if y'all did. He stopped paying for his ads like a month ago. He just stopped paying for his ads. He stopped them. Although he said he's still going to be on the ballots, I think he's still trying to destroy Biden. I saw Michael Knowles talking about did he even drop out, but I know a bunch of people are depressed. I think that about 15% of his supporters are going to go Trump. I just out of anger at the DNC, and then a good third of them are just not going to vote, and then the rest of them are just who knows where they're going to fall. I don't know if y'all agree with that or not, but that's my analysis.
So I think that while on policy Bernie may be more extreme than Biden, the one thing I could take comfort in if the nominee was Biden is that um, he's he's still all there. Like I hate to speculate, but it seems like Joe Biden just I don't know if it's dementia or
He's probably
some
going to be
other
in. He's probably going to
mental
be in
health
a
issues,
folks
but
home by the time the election gets here.
I will say that it's been kind of nice on Twitter. I have a lot of like communist people that follow me from UNT. They've all been like tweeting about how much they hate Joe Biden. So like that's kind of fun. I feel like now we all have that in common. But maybe that's just me.
No, that's not just you. And I have, I've told y'all before, she listens to this podcast, but I have a college Democrat friend who is like not a happy Democrat. I think she said she's going to go independent now. And it's not just the commies. I mean, it's like a lot of people are upset.
Yeah, I saw why I'm not on Twitter. Why I'm not voting for Joe was trending. Now I don't know if that was because of a lot of Democrats that don't like Joe Biden, or if it was because people were trying, like Republican people were trying to get that trending, or what it was. But yeah, I think there is definitely a big faction that's not okay with Joe Biden. I think it's gonna be a lot like what we saw in 2016.
Yeah, definitely. And what do y'all think about, I know we're talking about Bernie, but what do y'all think about the whole, at convention, they're going to present Hillary? Are y'all on that bandwagon? Anybody?
I don't think it would be Hillary, but there has been some talk about Andrew Cuomo, New York governor.
No, I saw Andrew Cuomo. So Chris Cuomo, his brother, is a CNN imbecile, and he was interviewing Andrew, and he's like, "So are you gonna run for president 2020?" And Andrew was like, "No." And he's like, "Are you thinking about it? No. Is it in your future? No. Are you humoring it? No." And Andrew's like, "I'm not running for president. I'm not thinking about it. I don't want to do it or anything." So I don't know if you can take Andrew Cuomo's word. He has pierced nips, but whatever. I don't know if y'all saw that or not, but this dude was wearing a shirt.
Yes. Unfortunately, sadly, I did see that.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna run, but I do think he would be a way more competent person than Joe Biden. I think just about anybody would be, but I'll give him credit. I think he's done a pretty decent job with his handling of coronavirus and stuff in New York. But yeah, I think we're stuck with Joe Biden. So yeah,
I mean,
I think that's good for us though, because
it's gonna be
it's gonna be another 4 years of Obama. And honestly, if you talk to a lot of Democrats, they don't like Obama. They really don't. I've gotten into a lot of debates before, and I'm like, okay, but Obama did this, and they're like, I didn't say I liked Obama, did I? And I'm like, oh, okay, some honesty's coming now, is what's happening.
I mean, anyway. I don't think it would necessarily be another 4 years of Obama. I mean, as we're seeing, Obama is not, at least last I checked, endorsing Joe Biden at all.
Yeah, which raises some suspicion, because that's, I mean, you would think after being under his employ for 8 years, you'd get an endorsement. But
well, and also on the Cuomo's, I mean, he may have done a decent job at running the state of New York with coronavirus, but I still that wouldn't be my pick for a Democratic nominee either.
No, it wouldn't. And I'm sorry, but I mean, okay, Cuomo has done the best he can given his resources and his circumstances, which he brought unto himself. They could have been more prepared for this. So with the circumstances, I think he's done a good job, but they could have been a lot more prepared. And don't even get me started on de Blasio, but that's another conversation. We're talking about Bernie. Anyway, does anybody have the coronavirus cases for Vermont? Anybody out there? I don't.
Nobody's even in Vermont. I don't think Vermont's real. But anyway, so So what I was wondering is, who do y'all think is sort of kind of a leading nominee or a leading person for the vice president spot for Biden?
For Biden?
Yeah, because I've heard a little bit about maybe Kamala Harris, but I want to.
That's what I was gonna say. I think Kamala Harris. If it's not Kamala, has Warren endorsed anybody? I don't think she has. Has she? Anybody know? We're so uneducated.
I think she did Bernie. I want to say. I think she did endorse him.
Yeah.
Kelly, who do you think the VP will be?
I could see Kamala, but I honestly don't really know. I don't think Joe knows either.
I think this is where identity politics comes into play.
Yeah,
I think Joe's
know.
just gonna do who the DNC tells him to.
I think he said it was gonna be a woman, but that doesn't mean much.
I think it's gonna be a woman minority.
Yeah, I could see that.
So it could also be Elizabeth Warren.
No.
She's like 1,024.
No,
did y'all see Trump's?
Oh yeah, I see the joke now. I'm sorry.
Did y'all see Trump's tweet where he was talking about, well, if Elizabeth Warren would have dropped out before Super Tuesday, Bernie probably would have swept up the Super Tuesday races.
Oh yeah,
I think he's
wanted to
definitely pretty right.
hire every single nominee. She knew she wasn't going to win. She stopped paying for her ads. Like in December, she stopped paying for her ads, or really early on, because she just knew it wasn't going to work out. And I think she stayed in on purpose to screw over Bernie and Biden because, I mean, neither one of them really likes her.
I think it really hurt Bernie a lot. I think Biden really, because and consistently in a lot of those states, she would take like maybe somewhere around like maybe 10% of the vote or something, somewhere around there. And Biden really uh, did well because of that. Like he won a lot of states, and so yeah.
Biden is really showing the I'm gonna make up a word unless it's a word, naiveness. Is that a word?
I think
Naiveness?
it's naivete.
I'm just a freshman, so it's okay.
I don't
The
know.
naive behavior
Refer to
of
Webster.
Democrats. So like, oh wow. So Obama was the first black president and Biden was his VP, who's extremely white, which means I now need to vote for Biden
Extremely.
or I'm a racist. It's basically the Democrat approach now. And then you realize, wait, they deported about 3 times what the Trump administration has deported in their first 3 years. And, the black unemployment was a historic high during Obama's presidency. It's like, okay.
So we have Mackenzie Haddix, the secretary of the Kansas College Republicans, on. And Mackenzie, I wanted to ask you. So in Kansas, does Bernie have a lot of support from college students, or what's the deal? Do you think a lot of his support's going to go over to Joe Biden, or do you think there's going to be some that decide that they like Trump?
Yeah. So when Bernie was still in the race and when we were still on college campus, um, definitely it did seem like he had a lot of support, but that's only because Bernie promises things that college kids want
Yeah.
and what sounds good. And so I think, but now, like since he dropped out, I've seen a lot of those college students posting on social media about how upset they are and how they weren't going to vote because a lot of the reason they were going to vote in the first place was because Bernie Sanders was promising all of these things that they wanted. And so I really think it's going to be good in Kansas, at least for Trump. He'll win. Trump will win in Kansas. But for sure, a lot of the Bernie Sanders supporters that were on our college campuses have decided that they're just not going to vote.
Yeah.
And a lot of them can't stand Joe Biden. So it's just it's good for us.
Okay.
So Mackenzie is Kansas. I don't really know much about Kansas except I mean I don't mean to be offensive, but Fields is all I know about Kansas. Is it a flip state or is it 100% red? What is it? What is it like?
So normally in the presidential elections, we will always vote red. I don't remember the last time we voted for a Democrat president, but we did just elect a liberal governor. And we've kind of just been going back and forth with governors. Seems like one year we'll have a Republican and the next term we'll have a Democrat. And so I can't really tell what Kansas, a lot of people say that we're going purple, but as soon as we start to think that we're going purple, we vote for a Republican governor. So I really just think Kansas voters are more about candidates and what they're promoting and not so much party lines. A lot of them they vote for the candidate. And so this year we voted for a liberal because she ran a more moderate platform while our Republican candidate ran a more right-wing platform, and that just didn't work out. So I don't know. I think that we're kind of just more conservative. Definitely our core values are conservative, but we can never tell in a gubernatorial race what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I was just kind of wondering what the demographics are over there because people say Texas is going to flip. No, it's not. Unless these Californians keep moving over here, we're fine. Now, Kelly, for example, lives in left heaven. Nate does not live in left heaven. Neither does Skylar. So, I mean, I don't know what y'all are dealing with at your college campuses with Bernie. I've seen life-size cutouts of Bernie on the university mall, yet I know a lot of people hate him.
Yeah, I have a professor that has a Trump flag in his office. So
yeah, see, I don't have that. I think a professor that had a Trump flag at UTA would be like fired or ejected.
Yeah. So Mackenzie, I had a question. So which school do you go to?
So I go to a little public school about an hour and a half south of Kansas State University. So I attend a little college called Emporia State University.
Okay.
So it's kind of in the middle of Kansas, like the middle of nowhere.
Is that a private school?
It's a public school.
Okay, it's public. Okay. So Mackenzie, I was wondering, what's sort of the feeling amongst students, and also what's the feeling among professors about Bernie or Biden, or have you seen much of a difference?
I think that a lot of the teachers try to keep their political bias to themselves because they know that we kind of live in this farm area, rural part of Kansas where a lot of students do hold conservative values. You do have the loud Bernie supporters that make it seem like they're way bigger than us, but they're really not. And so I think that for the most part, our professors do a really good job at keeping their political bias to themselves. I would assume that most of them are liberal Bernie supporters, but they don't really push it that much. There's the couple in your liberal arts colleges or things like that that'll just wear it on their t-shirt. But I don't think it's not really that bad here in Kansas when it comes to that. Sometimes you'll have the stories that make it on campus about something that happens in a classroom, but overall they do a really good job at accepting conservative students. And I don't think it's that bad.
Okay, so what I know we're talking about Bernie, but in Mackenzie's case, what are some of the abortion stuff that you've had to do in like the last, 6 months that you've been doing a lot of standing up for pro-life and stuff? What are some of the, because I know privately you've told me a lot about the just the craziness that goes on in Kansas, but most of us are not fully in Kansas politics. So what's some of the abortion stuff that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, so since we just elected a liberal governor, she's done everything she can. She's doing everything she can to push this pro-choice agenda. And most recently, last April, Planned Parenthood saw that we had just elected a liberal governor, and she had just appointed 3 different liberal Supreme Court justices on our Kansas Supreme Court. So Planned Parenthood saw this and cherry-picked Kansas as a state to work their pro-choice agenda in. And so what happened was they made up a court case. It went all the way to the Kansas Supreme Court, and the Kansas Supreme Court somehow ruled that abortion is a constitutional right. And so basically it allows late dismemberment, live, like the worst abortions you can think of, all the way up to term, totally legal in Kansas now. And so what we, the pro-lifers and people who even aren't pro-life in Kansas, decided was that these decisions should be left up to the people to decide and not the Supreme Court. They're overstepping their boundaries. And the legislature should choose what happens, and ultimately it gives the voice back to the people because we're voting for our legislatures. And so it gives pro-choicers and pro-lifers a say in the abortion debate, because when you leave it up to the Supreme Court, they take away all the power away from the people. And so basically we just started walking around different communities and neighborhoods, gaining petition signatures and different things. We took it all the way back to the Capitol, and it failed by a vote of 1. So we're going to keep pushing this constitutional amendment until we can get it back to the people so the people have a say in it. But Kansas has really, really, really become a bad state when it comes to abortion, because we see lots of laws similar to New York.
And a lot of people wonder, okay, why push a left agenda in Kansas, or why, people like Soros or big name donors, okay, why are they putting all their energy in Kansas? The way that they win is by going in all these House districts, going in all these Senate races, and pushing their agenda. Because, for example, Kansas has about 3 million people in the state, which, if you're a strong advocate for abortion, because you can talk about pro-choice, you can talk about whatever you want, but especially if it comes to Soros or donors, they're not interested in pro-choice. It's very much deeper than that. So when you look at 3 million people, okay, there's a big opportunity here to get abortion going. There's a big population. I can name you countries that have that population. So it just, And again, in the future, this is just episode 2. So in the future, we'll have an abortion topic at some point, and we'll go more in depth on this. But given Mackenzie's experience on this, we wanted to get her opinion on it. I don't know about Nate, Kelly, and Skylar, but at UTA, abortion, I mean, I'm a commuter, so it's hard to know what everybody stands with, but our generation is extremely sensitive to pro-choice, and they think they're being constitutional when really Roe v. Wade is a disaster. But I don't know if Nate, Kelly, and Skylar want to comment on your universities and how abortion is being portrayed.
I know my YCT chapter hasn't done a pro-life event yet, but we have another group on campus who did one. I think towards the beginning of this spring semester, and they just got harassed. Like, people thought it was us, so that was kind of the problem. But just the whole pro-life message, they were being polite, like they weren't harassing anybody. But the people coming in were just, I don't know, like heckling everybody just because they had a pro-life message. It's really frowned upon here if you're pro-life.
So here, for example, it is almost the complete opposite. Like, we do, like I said, have some of those kind of more socialistic leaning people who view it much like students at UNT would, but those are definitely the minority of students here. We've had actually pro-life speakers in chapel hosted by the university. My chapter was planning on doing a pro-life display actually this month before everything got moved online. So that has been postponed to next semester. But yeah, that's how things are here.
Here at Tech, we have a pretty good pro-life group called Raiders Defending Life, and they haven't really gotten a lot of negative attention whenever they go out. They'll just kind of ask people what they feel about different topics. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Mackenzie, thanks for hopping on and talking to us. We really appreciate you taking the time to get on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, thanks again for tuning into episode 2 of Saving the Republic podcast. Be sure to stay tuned for episode 3 and like, subscribe, share, whatever. We'll be putting out more content in the future. Thank you.
If you like this content, please like, subscribe, share it. If you hated it, like, subscribe, and share it. Thanks for tuning in.